who's to say that my more strict time with screen time, with junk food, with swear words, who's to say that I'm not creating some sort of shame or guilt around the fact that they like to do those things, the fact that they like junk food? Maybe her ability to have less shame and guilt around those things is beneficial. And maybe the fact that our kids are getting two different perspectives on that will allow them to choose the one that works for them. Because maybe, just maybe, me being a first-time parent, I don't have all of the answers. And I'm not getting it all right every single time. And maybe that's just the acceptance and the peace I need to give myself, and the allow myself to not always have to have the right answer to prove my worth. That maybe if my entire identity isn't wrapped up in being a dad, just like so many moms' identity is wrapped up in just being a mom, maybe if I don't get it right all the time, I'm still worthwhile, that I still have value,
It's still
that I'm
like,
still lovable.
So welcome to Blending and Mending. On the episode today, we have Jay Skibbens. So I've been watching Jay on social media, and how I would describe you, Jay, is just the definition of humility, someone who's just so relatable, someone who's genuinely living in their truth, and you're funny as hell. If I can put it out there, just the reels and the things that you say and how you bring it all together, it's just stunning. So, Jay, welcome to the podcast. I am beyond excited to have you with us this evening. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are up to at this moment.
I mean, right now I'm riding the high of that intro. Thank you. I feel like that's it's nice to hear. I appreciate that it comes across that way, because it's I think that anybody who's known me for a long time, the fact that the first word you said was humility, it would be like shocking to them.
Absolutely.
Which means that there's a lot of growth. I am. This is what you all see before you now is not how I have always been. That is for sure. It's just like there used to be a lot more bravado. There used to be a lot more like fake confidence. And I feel like now I'm able to really settle into just speaking my truth and just allowing that to be enough. And there's peace and there's power in that. And that's huge. So you kind of ask who am I? So I'm Jay, and I without realizing it was born into like doing co-parenting work, just because like my mom raised me on her own and like my dad wasn't around. So it was, and like from the jump, right? So like I wasn't one of those kids who was like waiting up for my dad to come home. Like it wasn't ever like, he wasn't part of our unit. So it just, and for a long time, I felt like that wasn't a big deal. Like since I wasn't actively mad, since I wasn't actively resentful, that I felt like it didn't have an impact. And anybody who has ever done daddy issues work or inner child healing knows that like if your dad's not there, it has a profound impact on your life. So what I do now is I'm a co-parent myself now. I was in a relationship that was super unhealthy and was very based on my own wounds and my own validation seeking and unhealthy coping skills. And there's a lot of emotional mess that I had to work through and to clean up. And once I really started to, and then put my story out on Instagram, because I have a somewhat wild story. A lot of people resonated with it. And then the next step was realizing how many people now struggle with their emotions and just the trap of blaming the other person for what they did to you, which is a trap that I was stuck in for a long time. And then now that, once you get out of a trap, once you overcome something, there's a lot of benefits from showing other people how to get out of that trap. So that's what I do now, is I help people get out of the trap of not feeling their emotions or projecting their emotions or a big one is taking the other person's emotions personally. Like once you learn how to do those,
Absolutely. Yeah.
once you can do those, you can do anything. So that's that. And then
Yeah.
like the cool part is what I see is, I used to call myself a co-parenting coach, but I think that the better way to say it is I'm a life coach for people who just happen to be co-parents. Like I'm going to help you live the best life that you probably don't even think is possible. And it's like if you're a co-parent, like sometimes we don't believe that's still possible. We don't have that hope
Hmm.
anymore. So that's
Yeah.
what I do. That's who I am.
So stunning. And guys, if you stay tuned straight through to the end of the episode, Jay is offering a 10% discount on his coaching sessions. So we will plug that in at the end. But Jay, I think what you've touched on, right, is just there's vulnerability in our heartache. There's whole vulnerability in the hard stuff we've been through. And I take my hats off to you just in terms of using your story to help other people. I think often we can get swallowed up in that emotion, put our head in the sand and try and carry on with life. But like you're saying, there's cycles and they keep coming back. With us focusing on co parenting specifically, and I know that that's a dynamic that you specialize in, I'm going to put you on a hard spot and ask you to take us back to maybe straight after your divorce. What did co parenting look like for you then? Because we don't know how to do this, right? No one thinks we're going to get divorced. You marry thinking this is your forever. Then divorce kicks in, and it's all this stuff after divorce. What was co parenting like for you guys?
So, and this is part of the unusual part of my story is that we weren't married. We didn't get
Okay.
divorced. We were, I don't know if they have this term in South Africa, but we were friends with the benefits. So we were just hooking up. And I think that this is where the weather, and then, because I think that people might hear that and be like, well, how could he help somebody who's been divorced? And it's like, whether it's somebody who's been divorced, I've helped people who have escaped out of like domestic violence. I've helped
Mhm.
people who have been the one who cheated on their spouse. I've been the one that helped the person who has been cheated. And for me, what I see over and over and over again is that we take our childhood wounds and we take our childhood lessons that we didn't learn
Yeah.
and we carry them into the relationship. So whether you've been married for 10 years, whether you were married for 10 months, or like me, if you weren't ever in that marriage, I was carrying my unmet needs into that relationship and trying, my way to get them validated was through sex. And somebody else, there's a lot of people that I coach, they might try to get their unmet needs met through doing everything. I'm gonna take
Mhm.
care of the kids and take
I'm
all
going to
care
take
of all the
control.
appointments. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that comes from a very like wounded masculine um, uh, heartache. And then what happens is that I did this, and a lot of people I coach, they like try to protect their heart, right? They're so wounded that they don't want to feel those feelings anymore. And then what happens when you have kids? You don't want the kids to feel them anymore. But you asked me like, what was it like at the beginning? And I just wanted to like just preface that I wasn't married. But for me, and I wrote some notes kind of going through this, is that the interesting thing for me, and I think that this actually happens with some people, is that initially it wasn't that bad. Like it was initially because we had that false hope. Like we had a false
Mhm.
sense of reality that like it was going to be okay, that everything was going to be magically okay, that we were going to do this without, scuff ups or, hiccups or really dealing with the emotional side of things. I think that we kind of lived in this like fairy tale land where we hadn't dealt with our emotions. We hadn't dealt with why we were in that position in the first place. So
Mhm.
I'm really glad that you kind of gave me that opportunity to prep for this question, because I would honestly say that initially we did a good job. We did the whole, we're not going to say anything bad. We're going to put the kids first.
Mhm.
So initially it was okay. Initially it, wasn't that like she would come over to my house. I would cook. We would pretend, we would play family. And I don't want to jump ahead, but it wasn't really
I'm
until
like,
we
what happened? Let's quickly go to fast forward.
right. So, but it wasn't until like reality set in. that like we're not going to be a family, we're not going to make this work, there's no magic fairy dust that somebody's going to
Mm-hmm.
sprinkle and make this be okay. It wasn't really until reality set in that it got hard, that it got like we realized that we don't agree on a lot of things, we realized that we have a very different parenting style. And then I think even as much as that, if not more, we had to deal with the fact of like what brought us together. And I don't like speaking too much on her side of things, but from
Mm-hmm.
what like I used our relationship to feel validated, like as a man. Like if I can be good at sex, if I can make her feel good, if I can do those things, then I'm going to feel validated as a man. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that she was using it to get to like the family unit that she wanted. And I think that the reality setting in that like she wasn't going to get what she wanted out of the situation, and I wasn't getting what I was wanting, because how could I? How could either one of us really, if that's how we were trying to go about it? It wasn't until
Mm-hmm.
the reality set in that our way of doing things was clearly not taking us anywhere. That's when the emotions started coming up. And I think that initially, once the emotions started coming up, we both projected it onto each other. Like we would say, "Oh, you're the worst," or like, "This is all your fault," or I remember thinking that she wasn't as good of a parent as I was, and I remember her saying that she would have rather had a child with anybody else in the world than me. So it was just when the reality hit that we were really going to have to co-parent, that we were really going to have to like figure out our own stuff, that's when it got messy. Like that's really, to me, when it got messy.
I love that though, because I think we get so caught up, like you're saying, in terms of romanticizing what we
Mm-hmm.
think life is going to be. We did that when we first met that person. And it sounds like you guys really have had to take a step back to understand the hard stuff. But I think when you're in that space of emotions, it's so much easier just to blame. But the challenge is this person is never going anywhere, right? They
Mm-hmm.
are the parent to your children. So whether you like them or not, somewhere you're going to have to try and find common ground, because they are going to be part of your life for an extended period of time. Whether it was friends with benefits, whether it was an I do at the altar, if you share a child with that person, they are going to be in your life. And I see that so much in the work that I do is parents get so caught up in their stuff. And I know you and I spoke about this. And sometimes it's hard just to focus on the kids only because you're part of that dynamic too. Um, but yeah, living a co-parenting relationship, I think, and trying to figure out those dynamics, it's so tricky, especially if you're co-parenting with someone that you don't trust. If you're co-parenting with someone who absolutely broke your heart, broke your ideal of what life should be, again, that projecting, right? Um, and now you need to parent with this person, whether they're living in your home or not. That is just how it works.
And I appreciate longer things like this, because on Instagram, like reels, I'm limited to like 15 to 30 seconds, right? I got to get a message across in like 30
But
seconds or
you
less, right?
smash those, by the way. Like
Well,
you do
I try.
so well.
Lots of
I need
practice.
tips.
Lots of practice. So thank you. But I like this type of a platform because it's what you just said is like when you co-parent with somebody you don't trust. And to me, the conversation then, it always is going to need to shift back inward. Like anybody who's going
Mhm.
through something that they're scared of, anybody who's going through something that they feel uncertainty around, it's human nature to look for control. I think that we dub that as a narcissistic trait, but human beings want to have control. They want to feel in control because it makes them feel safer.
Mhm.
And everybody has a choice about whether they're going to look for that control outside of themselves or inside of themselves. So a lot of who I think people pleasers identify as, they're going to give suggestions. They're going to give suggestions to get that control. Like we shouldn't let the kid have pop before the age of 5 or something, or we should limit screen time. And if you hear it, it's like we should, right? We should. We're not the we unit anymore. But I'm going to preface it we because that's what I want. I want control in this situation. Like we should use this kind of car seat. We should feed them this type of food. The people pleaser wants control just like the narcissist does, right?
Mhm.
And what that leads to is more disconnect, though, because you're not really being truthful about it being what you want. and you're setting up expectations that are going to cause a lot more turmoil. So we have that choice of looking outward, trying to control the situation, trying to control them, or we can look inward. And there's a question that I ask everybody that I talk to the first time I talk to them, like on clarity calls or when I'm starting a new coaching relationship. And I ask them, when did the relationship end? And they'll tell me, 10 months ago, 2 years ago. And I okay, like that. Okay. When did you first feel that this wasn't the right person? And it's like the question is just like a splash of cold water on their face, right? They're like, it's like that realization of like, oh, dang, he's gonna go there. Like, I might really have to like self-reflect today. I might really have to dig deep today. And it's almost always super early on. It's almost always like the first date.
It's always the red flags. Yeah.
Yeah, you knew, you felt it. You felt it. And then there's some people, and I will say that these people are out there that they're like, oh, I was just completely blindsided. I was completely blindsided. And I promise that if I worked with those people, we'd dig up into the fact that like there were things, and it's okay. And this is not to blame or to cast judgment, but what you said about trust, I can't trust them. All we have to do is focus on trusting that intuition. Your intuition was always there. Like what you needed to hear was always there, always inside of you. And whether it was because of your childhood and your parenting, and then school doesn't do a really good job of tapping into your intuition, and then you carried those wounds into your relationship, instead of focusing on how can I trust them, how can I get them to act in a trustworthy way, or how can I get them to respect my boundaries, it's how can I start listening to my intuition again? Like how can I tap into what I'm feeling? Because that's what's going to lead me to the life that I want. Not how can I get them to do this? How can I get them? How can I trust myself again?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, what you're saying is profound, right? And I could feel myself almost getting a bit emotional about that question. And you and I had the conversation 2 weeks ago, right, where you posed that exact same question. But I think often what happens is people get so caught up, and it's almost this tunnel vision of the drama, the chaos, the uncertainty, the fact that you need to co-parent with this person, this is what they did to hurt me, that they don't take that step out. And almost, and I want to say it's emotional intelligence, but it's maybe even more than that. It's taking that step to give yourself permission to self-reflect in terms of how am I feeding into this dynamic? Because at the end of the day, and I say this a lot in blending and mending, you cannot control what's happening in the other home. And you can have the conversations about what I think our children should be eating, what I think our children should be watching. But you can have the conversation, and then you need to trust that the other parent is going to do what they're going to do, and that they're making the right decisions for your child when your child is in their care, and vice versa. I need my ex-husband to trust me when my daughter is with me. But I mean, tapping back into what you're saying, so many people don't take that step out. They don't hold up the mirror. They don't do the work. And you just get these cycles that continue. And I mean, it goes back again to it's a breakdown of relationship between you and the co-parent. Yeah, you guys are having to try and figure out some sort of routine. The kids are in the mix of it. They're feeling the dynamic. And it's just overall, it's not healthy. So you touched on earlier, Jay, you said it was very romanticized in the beginning. And then you guys got to a space where it felt like things were falling apart. What was happening in that space where you could feel it shifted? It's not what it was. We're in a sticky spot.
And for me, so I've been co-parenting for 9 years. So some of this, I'm so glad you've asked these questions because it's helping me think back and reflect. And even just that talk of the romanticized period, it's like I feel like I should talk about that more on my platform just because I see so many people going through that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality, I think, is that it got hard. It got hard. Like at that point, we had 2 kids. So they were my first 2 kids. I had never parented before. So I'm learning how to parent with 2 kids who are 15 months apart. There's other layers to the story that like added emotional stress, and it was hard. And I think that flat out, that's what it comes down to. And when things get hard, we're gonna blame somebody. It's so easy to blame them. It's just so easy to blame the other person because they do suck. right? Like it's like to you, like they did like when you're in that mindset of they did this, they cheated, they left, they don't pay child support, they don't do this. It's so easy. Like and it's not even like and like I'll show the shifts, but I'll be fully transparent that like the same things that used to really stress me out about my co-parent and like really stress me out about getting the kids back, they still happen. Like they still come back tired after the weekend. They still come back with what I call fuzzy teeth, and they still come back, with bags of candy. And it was me who chose to stop letting those
Yeah.
types of things eat me up. The kids come back with a bag full of candy, and I'm going to let that ruin 2 hours of my life, and probably more than 2 hours because I'm probably saying something under my breath, or I'm keeping a mindset that is detrimental, and I'm wasting that emotional energy. I'm not present with the kids. I'm not building a business. I'm not having conversations with the people around me about like the present moments. I'm having conversations with the people around me about my co-parent, about how awful she is, about how hard this is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's just this part of we got to grow up. Like I know that so
Yeah.
like it can be as again cold water. It's like guess what? Parenting is hard. If you're doing it with a wonderful partner, parenting is hard. So
It's
doing
still
it by
hard. Yeah.
yourself, it's so hard. It's because and I think that we're the first generation to parent in the way that we are is because we are facing our childhood wounds. So like the toughest parts for me when I'm parenting is when I like in the moment that it's happening, am seeing my own wounds being acted out. That I'm responding from my person, my own wounds. That I'm being triggered
Yep.
by what they're saying or what they're doing because I'm still in pain. And it's like I think that previous generations just their that thought hadn't entered into the conversation yet. So like they would just yell or they would just spank or they would just do whatever because that was what
It was
was done.
Yeah, it was compartmentalized, where I think we're so mindful today in terms of how we're showing up for our kids. Yeah. But
Right.
in that
So
same process, I saw a quote today, actually, so I'm going to share it with you after this. But it was absolutely about in that moment, you're trying to be mindful with your child and help them, for example, emotionally regulate, but you're still trying to figure that out for yourself. So it's trying to strike that balance.
yeah, and I think that like in my group session there was a powerful moment because one of the moms in the group was explaining to me how she was in a situation with her daughter and her own mom. So we'll say granddaughter, mom, and grandma, right? So the granddaughter was having this big emotional like outburst, and it was stressing out grandma. And she was like, "Well, why are you letting
Mm-hmm.
her say that? Why are you letting her do that? Like she shouldn't be able to do that kind of a thing." So what my client, who's I think that she's actually done with the program now, what she was able to do in that moment was like allow her child, allow the daughter to have that emotional expression without trying to squash it and understand how like where her mom was coming from without judging or criticizing how her
Mm.
mom was reacting and then like have the awareness that like neither one of their emotions were her responsibility and it's just this
Oh,
amazing
wow.
thing, right? Like think about that. So what is
No,
happening when people are
that's
doing this
huge.
work is that like they're healing previous generations, which means that we're cutting off that supply of pain and fear that comes to us. So we're healing previous generations while empowering future generations. So every time I'm like doubtful of my work, every time I'm like, oh man, like I haven't had this or that for a while, or this or like, something like that'll happen. It's like, Jay, you're having a global generational impact on the world. And it's like, oh, okay, I think I'm okay. Like I think
Oh,
everything's gonna work
absolutely,
out.
though.
Everything's gonna be okay. But that's what's
Jay,
possible.
and I know I actually want us to get into your emotional burden model because I know that you spoke about that so beautifully in terms of expectations and boundaries. But I just want to take you one step back before we get into that because I get asked this a lot. I think on these platforms, we get so caught up in terms of the man, the woman, the relationship, the dynamic, and the hardships, for example, with co parenting between the two parents. What was it like for your children?
Mm.
8 years ago, 7 years ago, in comparison to what it is now?
So, and this is where I, again, I feel like I have a somewhat, and I wouldn't even say unique, because I tell other people that their situations are super unique. The situation that my kids were in was that it was normal from the jump, right? Like there wasn't this established way of life and then they changed.
Okay.
So we were co-parenting from birth. And I think that for the kids, it has just made certain things normalized so early that allows them to see different perspectives now. And I think that that's what I would say to somebody who's going through it, that had a life that they had established and they are fearful of what this change or what this split or what
Mm-hmm.
co-parenting or divorce is going to do, is that like this isn't how it always has been, because now my co-parent lives an hour away. We meet in the middle at like this random four-way stop at a farm that neither one of us knows the owner of. And like my kids don't care. Like they don't, like they're like, oh, why do we have to go to that stupid farm? Why do we have to go this or that? It's like, oh, we're just going to see mom,
Yeah.
right? We're going to
That's
mom's
their
house.
normal.
That's their normal. And I think that the
Yeah.
more the adults are able to carry on the normality and not pretend, but like my kids are able to tell me like, hey, I'd like to, I wish they're able to say things. And I think that like my big thing that I'm kind of skirting around is that like I found out when my kids were 15 and 30 months old that they aren't biologically mine. Right.
Okay.
So like that's a huge part of my
Wow.
story, and part of the emotions that I had to work through is that like I found that out on my own. Like that wasn't something that was admitted to me. So I had to do the emotional repair in my own world. And through a lot, and we might cover this, is that my kids know,
I was going to ask,
right?
do they know? Okay.
They know. I was able to tell them and talk about it to them last year. And
Okay.
I'm not going to lie, guess what? It comes up when they get upset with me. It comes up actually not even all the time when they're not upset. Like it just, they'll tell strangers at Target, like, oh, that's not my real dad. And it's like, but they're like, the difference and why I'm bringing this up is that like when I was growing up, my dad was such a non-topic. Like it wasn't like my mom was like, no, we're never going to talk about him. It was the fact that she just never did, that by the
Mm-hmm.
time I was old enough to articulate good questions about him, I just felt the energy was that we don't talk about him. So I just, this person that is hugely important in my life, even though he's not there,
Yeah.
wasn't available for discussion. And so I think that when we do our emotional work, when we really start to heal ourselves, what we do is we're able to create space for our kids and allow them to explore what it is that this life is offering them. Because co-parenting isn't going to ruin your kids. Divorce isn't going to ruin your kids. And it
Please
actually
say that
could.
again. Because so many, no, but so many people need to hear that, right? Divorce is not going to ruin your kids. Just be it. Just step into that moment, figure out a new normal, and give them a space where they know that they're loved, even though their
Well,
dynamic looks different.
exactly, exactly. And I think that people are so scared that they don't know what to say, or they're going to say the wrong
Yeah.
thing. And more often than not, what your kids, they don't need you to answer their questions. They don't need you to explain it to them. They just need a place to talk. And if you haven't gotten to the point where you can hear those questions and at least create the space for them to talk, then you've got like that's a mirror moment. Like you've got to look in the mirror, like, why can't I listen to my kid? Why, like, I want to, everybody's like, I want to be I'm my kid's safe space. They act up more with me because they trust me more, and they love me, and they can do that with me more because I'm the safe space. But a
Yeah.
truly safe space, that you hear something and your kid trusts that things aren't going to change, or that like that's not going to take you higher or lower. Like a safe space is that they get to act and express their emotions and you stay constant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that you're a doormat, and that doesn't mean that you're a punching bag that they can say whatever they want and you don't change. You still have boundaries, you still protect your own energy, and that's actually safe for your kids too, because if they know that they can hit you, or they know that they can say mean things to you and you don't do anything to protect yourself, then that's not safe either. We have to understand that
Mm-hmm.
like our boundaries create safety. Our structure creates safety. And what we're doing is that's kind of how we tap into the masculine and the feminine. The masculine's
Mm-hmm.
job, and as a co-parent, as a single parent, we have to find that balance, especially the masculine, we should be a container, right? We should be a container and allow the feminine or allow the emotions to be able to do about anything that they want and it not ruin the container and not break the container. Because that's almost like the thing that I was missing, and to go all the way back to the beginning of not having a dad, the thing that I feel like I was missing that I've been chasing my entire life and I've had to recently learn was the void and learn how to give it to myself,
Mm-hmm.
is that I've never been held and cuddled and felt safe in a man's arms. Like, think about
Jay,
how
that's big.
simply, right? Think about how simply
That's
I can
big.
give that to my kids. That, like,
Yeah.
every time that they have a scratch, every time that they're scared, every time that they're upset, I can just hold them and tell them, hey, it's going to be okay. Hey, you're
It's gonna be
okay.
okay. Yeah.
So to me, what I realized is that that's the feeling I was chasing. Even in the relationship, even through sex, it was like, if I can prove I'm worth it, maybe somebody will do that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then what I had to
Inner
realize,
healing.
I'm
I'm
telling you, I
seeing
don't,
inner healing. Bloody hell.
if you want to get better at co-parenting, like you want to like work with me, we're not just going to make co-parenting possible. We're going to like break down fear. We're going to break down shame. We're going to make you unstoppable, because I had to realize, because there was a moment with my kid that like I was holding him and I felt his body like surrender. You know how like kids
Mm-hmm.
act, like how their body goes limp when they're sick?
Yeah, and they just cuddle into you. Yes, they
Yeah.
trust you. That's their
And
safe
like
space. Yeah.
my two kids are boys, and my older one especially can be prickly at times, in the sense that like I have to kind of pick my spots on when I can get emotions and affection from him. And there was this one in particular time where I was holding him in close and he really melted, and like 5 seconds in I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm holding him but I'm really holding myself. I'm This is really like an inner child I'm holding of myself. And that's when that thought hit me. It was like, oh my God, I've never experienced this. And
Mm-hmm.
then after I put him to bed and I sobbed profusely on the
Oh,
couch, oh my gosh, I've cried so much in the past 2 years of just like releasing pain. I think that we all cry and we all like, well, I won't speak for everybody, but like there's crying because you can't figure something out. There's crying because you're just
mm-hmm.
overwhelmed. And then there are cries that you can feel you're just like releasing decades of like pent up pain and pent up emotion. And it's like full body sobs and like cathartic cries. I've been tapping into those and they're next
I
level.
just
But like,
love, I love that you embrace that though. And I think without being bringing stereotypes into this, and looking at belief systems, right? I think this is also just a breath of fresh air. I had an Afrikaans, which is one of the culture groups that we have in South Africa, but I had an Afrikaans male on the podcast, and we released his episode about a month ago. But even him speaking about the hardships, what it felt like growing up in a Christian home, the belief systems that surround a divorce, it was phenomenal to hear. And I think for me now, and having other people hear you, it's okay to let it go. It's okay to hold up the mirror. It's important, not just okay, I have to hold up the mirror. If I want to show up as my best self, my true self every single day for myself, for my family, for my children, and even in my co parenting dynamic, I think it's so powerful. Now I'm
yeah.
looking at the word behind you, mindset. Now that's really standing out to
I
me.
mean, right? No,
No, proper.
and it is, and it's that sense then that like what, and I think that this is where the real shift happens for people, is that moment really clarified what I do in my business, because my coaching program is both group sessions and you work one-on-one with a coach, and there's an entire video course that goes along with it. And what I realized after that moment is that my entire, like, without even being conscious of this is how I created it, my coaching experience for people is that safe space, is
Mm-hmm.
that like strong masculine arm of just like, I'm not going to fix this for you, but I'm going to hold you and tell you that things are going to be okay. I'm going to believe that you're going to be okay until you're ready. Like my son, after a little while, like he got his cuddles in and then he kind of shrugged me off and he went to sleep.
Shake it off.
And
Yeah.
right. And that's what my coaching program is that I'm gonna, the program is gonna hold you. The program is gonna let you know that you're okay, that you're not crazy, that these things aren't just you and it's not just him or her, that you're gonna make it, you're gonna be okay and do so much good stuff. And then you kind of release. And I think that this is the point that I want to make with this is that if I'm not aware that that's the feeling I'm chasing, right, then I could give it to millions of people. I could become a multi-conglomerate billionaire, but if that void is in me, if I'm not giving it to me, then it's all for naught. And I think that so many people,
what's the point?
They go into co-parenting, they go into parenting especially, and they don't want their kids to feel that feeling. Whatever it is that your wounds are, you don't want your kids to feel that. And then a lot of people try to help other people with that. Obviously, I'm doing it too, right? Like you try to help other people not feel that feeling that you don't want to feel. And it's not until we are able to start healing it in ourselves and giving ourselves what we need, like me talking to little Jay, like little inner Jay, like 7-year-old, 8-year-old Jay, and talking to him and being like, hey man, like you're going to be okay. Anytime I get stressed out, anytime there's anxiety, I literally will like set up a mirror that like, I sit at the foot of my bed, I kind of turn the mirror and I have started like just like looking myself, making eye contact with myself and talking myself through it. And it's just the first time I like, again, broke down and cried because it was like, I felt like it was a person I hadn't seen in decades. It was a person I hadn't really made time for. And when we're stuck making time for everybody else, when we're stuck giving ourselves to everybody else, you lose. That's how we lose ourselves. That's how we like feel so disconnected from ourselves, is because I don't like anybody who's listening to this. When's the last time you like really made eye contact with yourself and like talked to yourself? And not just
when you just said that now, I was like,
right? It was like I really sat. It was like I sat down and I just started doing this like within the last month. The first time it was like I had sat down with a friend that I hadn't seen in 20 years. Like, that feeling that like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in forever. But that's with me. I felt that
it's
about
embracing
myself.
vulnerability. You're actually triggering a memory for me now, Jay. And this is so crazy. From probably about 15 years ago, could it be? I just started working at an NGO and we were working with children who were in trouble with the law. They were first-time offenders. And part of our diversion program was a song. And now I need to remember this song. But we would give each child a mirror. The song would play and they needed to look at themselves and listen to the lyrics. And the song was just completely validating. It doesn't matter that you've made mistakes. You're still a good person. And the kids would just sit there and they would cry because they're looking at themselves in this mirror. So, I mean, it's so profound. It's so therapeutic. And I haven't thought about that. So thank you for bringing that memory back to me. Wow.
Well, think about all the things that you need to hear like that. If you're not hearing it from yourself, then the chase is always to hear it from outside of yourself. And you'll find ways to seek it out. And the more you can tap into all of the things that you wish you would have heard as a kid, all of the things that you wish that somebody would have validated or somebody would have seen or somebody would have told you it was okay. There's so many weird people out there. There's so many people that like, they'll start a sentence with like, oh, I know this sounds crazy, or I know this is silly. And it's not. It's not. It's only the stories you've been given. Like, so sit with yourself. Tell yourself what 7-year-old you needed to hear. Tell yourself what 10-year-old you needed to hear. Like those moments that you can look back on and it's like, I just wish somebody would have been there for me. Go back to that moment and talk yourself through it. And then make that a daily or at least regular practice. And like, yeah, then you don't get swayed so much by what your co-parent says to you. You don't get swayed by their words. Like you give yourself that power.
And that's a big thing, right? It's taking power back in those relationships. And I know the focus on the topic today is co-parenting, but I mean, could you talk us through expectations and boundaries? Because I think that's something that's been one of my personal lessons is Chantal, stop expecting A, B, and C to happen. It didn't happen when you were married. It's not going to happen in your co parenting relationship. Accept it and figure out other ways that you can either rid yourself of this stress or control it in your own way. So I've got a lot of work to do, Jay. But I really had to get to a point where I would have a conversation and then start taking expectations off of the table because I would drive myself insane. And I see it with so many people that I talk to. But I thought he would have said this. I thought he would have done this. I assumed she would have had the logic and the knowledge to put the child first and do ABC as an example. And it's expectations, it's our stuff that we're projecting ultimately.
Yeah, and you say so many things worth like touching on there, but like for me, the way I explain it to clients is like the fact that like your emotions, and especially when it comes to co-parenting, your emotions are really a space between the expectations that you set and the reality of what happens. So to me, those can be very far apart. Like those can be, I expect a very simple, easy response because I asked a very simple, easy or a simple, easy question. Like, can we switch? Or, what time did they go to bed last night? You ask a simple question in your mind and you expect a simple response. But then the reality is that like, well, why do you need to know that? They went to bed at a certain time and that if they're tired, it's your fault. If your expectations are still over here, what we have to realize is we can't control the outcome. Like we can't control them and what they say. So the only thing that we can control is the expectation. And this is where, if you're listening, like my hands are like lateral right now, right? They're like horizontal. That's the movement. I think that so many people get trapped in like, I need to lower my expectations. And to me, that subconsciously means that you're up at the top and you're going to lower yourself down to where they're at.
Okay.
And to me, that keeps you subconsciously in the mindset that you're the better parent, that your way is better. I'm going to let go of they need to do it the right way, and I'm just going to let them do it their way, which is the bad way, quote unquote. If we have that vertical top to bottom, then we keep that judgment. But that's also keeping us distant. But if we think of it laterally, it's more of a difference because, again, not to throw my co-parent under the bus, she like our views on screen time, sleep, junk food, wildly different. And I could focus on the fact that she lets them have whatever they want. She lets them do this. But I also know that like when my kids see their mom, they run up to her and the love between them is something that I don't think that I even have. Right? I've got to be able to see that too. That I've got to be able to see the positives that she brings, the ways that truly we're co-parenting because we are giving our kids multiple perspectives on how life works. Like I'm single. I don't have a partner. I've never lived with a partner. My co-parent is married, right? So we're giving them multiple perspectives on how to live life. And if you only see the negatives, if you only focus on your expectations and the fact that they're not meeting them, that's why your emotions are staying so big. So we can change our expectations to like what I had to do, stop asking the questions. If my kid comes
but
back
that takes
tired,
so much strength. So much strength.
but it takes accountability. Because let's say it's the bedtime question, and it's definitely why I use that one because it's one that I used to ask. What time did they go to bed last night? You know what would happen is that no matter what she said, I wouldn't believe her. Because if they were tired and she said, "Oh, they went to bed at 8 p.m.," I'd be like, "Well, there's no way because they're tired." So like I would ask her the question, and then no matter what she would say, it was going to be the wrong answer, and it would just validate the fact that I was pissed off, or that it would validate my emotional reaction to this sense that is hard. So what I had to do is let go of, it doesn't matter what time they went to bed. It doesn't matter if she answers my question. I'm still gonna have to parent this tired child. And even if she's told me the truth, well, they didn't go to bed until after 12. They didn't go to bed until after midnight. Again, that would just validate, oh, she's the worst. She's doing this or that. And then I would still have to parent the tired child. So I just want to cut out the middleman and parent the tired child. And then what I can shift And what I'm able to do now is, instead of, oh, she's the worst, it's like, I'm so grateful that I know that when the kids are here, they're going to get rest. I'm grateful that like we've got a situation that they like, when I know that they're here, they're getting the rest that I want them to get.
Yes. And
So
it's
I just
again,
don't.
it's your home. You can focus on your home. You can focus on your children in your home. That's what you have control over.
Yeah, because let's be real. If I'm I, who's to say that my more strict time with screen time, with junk food, with swear words, who's to say that I'm not creating some sort of shame or guilt around the fact that they like to do those things, the fact that they like junk food? Maybe her ability to have less shame and guilt around those things is beneficial. And maybe the fact that our kids are getting two different perspectives on that will allow
Mm-hmm.
them to choose the one that works for them. Because maybe, just maybe, me being a first time parent, I don't have all of the answers. And I'm not
Yeah.
getting it all right every single time. And maybe that's just the acceptance and the peace I need to give myself, and the allow myself to not always have to have the right answer to prove my worth. That maybe if my entire identity isn't wrapped up in being a dad, just like so many moms' identity is wrapped up in just
Mm-hmm.
being a mom, maybe if I
Mm-hmm.
don't get it right all the time, I'm still worthwhile, that I still have value,
It's still
that I'm
like,
still
yeah.
lovable.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, like, there,
Jay, I,
not everybody, like, I'm telling you, like, not everybody is ready to
yeah.
work with me. Not everybody is ready to work with me. And that is okay. This is a journey. It's like when you get to that place where you're like, I just don't want to live life this way anymore. I can't wake up stressing about him anymore. I can't wake up stressing about what she's gonna say next. Is
Yeah. Because it
you've got to
becomes
be ready for a
consuming.
change. You've got to be ready to
Yeah.
get out of that, like, those doldrums, that like it, because it's not gonna take any more energy to live a wonderful life than it's taking right now. But you're gonna have to let go of a lot. You're gonna have to let
And
go
that's where
and
the
just
hard work sits. Right
yeah.
there. That is not easy, right? That's the sweet spot. I mean, Jay, I can talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I mean, you and I met a week or 2 weeks ago. I'd said to you, look, we're saying one podcast. I reckon we need to do a couple, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm just listening to you and I'm tapping into what you're saying. And I think, again, for me, it's just what is as clear as day is that you've done the work. You're still doing the work.
Oh
And
my
I'm going to
God.
stick to my intro in terms of saying just that humility, because it takes a very humble and vulnerable man to dig as deep as you have, to really open up those wounds and work through those wounds to try and help the people around you. Jay, two last things from me. One is, if you could leave our listeners just with one aha moment of wisdom, what would that be?
I think it is the fact that there's no finish line. Like I think that people want to know how to heal, or they want to know how to get to a good place, as if it's a destination. And
Mm-hmm.
the more work I do, the more I do with myself and the more I coach, people will work with me for 3 months and we'll do some intense stuff. And like, almost to a person, they see it as a beginning. Like they see, like, it's almost like they've shed this skin, and then their growth journey continues. It's not like that I don't think of
Mm-hmm.
healed as a past tense word. I don't think that, like, I'm not going to promise to fix anybody. I think of it more as like this continual shedding of skin. Like, I'm going to have to shed skin for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to shed these layers that don't work for me anymore. And once you kind of start to embrace that side of things, you'll stop looking for short term solutions. You'll stop
Mm-hmm.
looking for, how can I get him to stop doing this specific thing? How can I get him to stop saying this specific thing? How can I get him to respect this specific boundary? And it's like, how can I live a life that I respect my own boundaries? How can I live a life
Mm-hmm.
where other people's words don't impact me? And that's a continual thing. That's like, I'm still doing work that I do with my clients, like people who are in for the first day. I'm doing that work too. So I think that we've got to just accept that like, you're going to be co-parenting until one of you guys die. Like, so like, it doesn't end when the kid turns 18. There's college, there's university, there's
No.
marriages, there's
Yeah.
holidays, like,
Grandkids, everything in between.
right. So let go of it being a destination and just focus on the process, focus on the journey.
I might even use that as a quote on social media. I'll tag you.
There you go. See,
But I
that's it's
think that's
cool.
stunning. Jay, how do our listeners get a hold of you? And if they want to set up a clarity call with you, how do they go about that?
Yeah. So what I want people to know is that like the clarity calls are really for people who want to join my program. Like I just talked about, there are people who want to sign up for a clarity call for me to fix them in 45 minutes, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just not what I
Yep.
do.
Yep.
So for people who want to join my program, like Instagram is the best place. I'm just at Jay Skibbens, and that's where you're going to find my reels. That's where you're going to find resources in my bio. And then that's also where you can sign up for a clarity call. And what I love is that if you're just interested, if you're like, hey, Jay, I heard you on the podcast, this is my situation, I'll send you a voice note. Like I'll reach out to you personally and tap into what's going on. And that to me is going to be monumental because like I said, not everybody's ready. And sometimes there's just like, a prompt I can send over to you or a workbook that's going to do a lot to break you free from whatever it is you feel stuck on. And then keep following and we'll figure it out from there. But
I love
Instagram is
it.
the number one spot at Jay Skibbens and reach out. Like I'm a real person. Like I'm doing this because clearly I'm put on this earth to do this. Like that, there's no
Yeah.
other. Like once you accept that, once I accepted that, everything started to make a lot more sense.
So I can validate that, Jane. I think I said this to you when I first met you. My sister told me about your profile on Instagram, and she had joined one of your live discussions, and she had posted a question, and you had replied to her, and she sent me a WhatsApp immediately, and she was like, Chance, Jay sent a message. He replied to my question. She was so excited. So I can validate that humanness in you and just that you're absolutely in this for the right reasons. So guys, if you want to reach out to Jay, I'm going to create all the links. I'll make sure everything's on social media so it's easy access. And then he is offering a 10% discount if you do want to join his course. All you need to do is type in blending 10, or when you reach out to him, just recite the code and we can access that 10% for you. Jay, thank you for your time. I'm already thinking about when and dates and how I get you back on the podcast.
Yeah, no, you're a good host. You do like it's a good safe space. It's a container that I enjoy. So I would be
Thank
100% open to
you.
this.
Thank you. And you've given me so much to think about. I think to myself, maybe I need to do your
I
course
mean, I'm telling you,
and really dig deep.
everybody. Yeah, it is not for the faint of heart, but I'm telling like we're called the creators, and it's because we create our lives. Like that's what co-parents are going to need to
Mhm.
know how to do is like we, without limits. That's the coolest part is that
Without
there's just
limits.
we're adults now. We can do whatever we want. It's cool. That applies to life too. So
I love
I'm
that.
telling you, you come in, we'll do some big things.
Jay, thank you. Sending lots of love and just blessings to you and your family all the way from South Africa. And cannot wait to share this episode. So thank you and have an awesome evening.
Thanks, you too.
Bye, Jay.